Welcome, everyone. I'm Kylie Petersmith. I'm one of the co-chairs with the practice committee. I am excited today to welcome Bluebird Cultural Initiative here to start off. This is the first of two webinar series that we're going to do, really looking at the historical environmental injustices and the historical aspects of Indigenous community. Um, Bluebird Cultural Initiative is located here in the Midwest. I'm located in Omaha, and it's in the Omaha Midwest area. And we have Nicole Benegas with us. Nicole began her nonprofit career uh, of 7 years ago, working in youth development. She holds an accounting degree from Metropolitan Community College and has extensive experience in project management, developing programming, and really programming that is focused on culturally relevant Native American for our youth. Nicole's training includes an emphasis on suicide prevention, and she enjoys spending time with her husband, her children, and her large extended family. And she's an enrolled member of the Lakota tribe. Nicole is now the executive director of Bluebird Cultural Initiative. And Nicole, I'll open it up to you to start sharing.
Good afternoon. My name is Nicole Benegas. I'm enrolled Sichangu Lakota, which are the Rosewood, who reside on the Rosewood Reservation. Sichangu means burnt thy people, actually, is a translation. I also come from the Yanktawa Dakotas, who are from Yankton, South Dakota area. Um, I also come from a background of being Hispanic. My grandfather comes from Border Town, Texas. And so that's kind of who I am and how I've grown up. I'm going to share my screen. Maybe. Okay. See that? Okay. Um, so I'm the executive director for Bluebird Cultural Initiative. Bluebird, we really focus on the Native community, self-identifying, but we uh, serve the community at large. We do a lot of professional development, working with a large variety of community partners to just engage and bridge the gaps between services and the Native community and different resources. So today we are going to talk about just storytelling, giving some history to environmental justice in the background of just the resistance of natives, as well as giving you more of a foundation of who we are at Bluebird and what we do, and how it's relevant to environmental justice. So I have been at Bluebird since 2021. Prior to that, I was at a Native Treatment Center here in the Omaha area, running youth and family programming there for just over 7 years. But I've been doing nonprofit work specifically with the Native community for 20, just over 20 years now. I started when I was about 18, 19, when I was living in South Dakota, working with Native youth up there for another nonprofit. To looking at Indigenous history, um, we talk about land rights, legal fights, treaties, sovereignty of Indigenous Native people specifically, and then environmental protections. It only made sense that we are, sorry, I'm trying to move this. Um, all things about Natives have to do with environmental justice. Since the first contact of Europeans, it has um, always been a barrier of our own traditional understanding of the rights and us being stewards of the land. And so I want to just kind of go into some of the more kind of relevant movements that have really been highlighted in the Native community, and we really try to teach with our young people as well, so that they understand like where we've been. We know that we continue to history will repeat itself if we don't know where we've been and how it's gone after. So, one of the big ones that really started was the Red Power movement, which started in the '60s. A lot of people will hear of the like Alcatraz Island of the takeover there, but there was actually an initial occupation of Alcatraz in '64 by five Lakotas who had just occupied it. It was for a short 4 hour time frame. Um, but after that, that was the first kind of like, hey, we can stand up and we can use our rights as Native people. At that time, it was any abandoned federal land. You were able to, as natives, you had the right to kind of uh, recuperate that land back to native usage. And so in '69 is the one that people really know about, is when there was the occupation of Alcatraz, and that lasted for 19 months. Um, and it was actually a group of students from UCLA, native students who had occupied it initially. After some time being there, there were other groups that came into it, and there were a lot of separations within the groups that were occupying it. But really, they were holding out. They were wanting to bring policy change, getting reparation for land. They were initially were requesting to utilize that land for the Alcatraz Island as a native, like to create a native center. And so that's really what initiated that. Um, but then there was the American Indian Movement, or AIM, which was founded in '68 prior to the occupation. But they're really known for this. In 1972, there was a takeover of the BIA, or the Bureau of Indian Affairs, their headquarters in DC. And that was there was a caravan of natives who all went to DC, had set up teepees and stuff out there, but then ended up taking over the headquarter building, um, demanding that the rights of Native people really be looked at, that the treaties be followed that were put in place before, in wanting them to really keep their word on what they were going to do. Um, Out of that occupation, or out of that takeover, what did happen was like the Menominee were restored as a federal tribe in 1973. They had lost their federal status as a tribe in '71 before that. And that kind of led up into a lot of other movements with natives, but also there being a push on like, hey, we need to stand up, and when we collectively come together, we can start seeing change, for the environmental injustices and social injustices that we're seeing, related to Native people and the land that we have occupied. So in '73, there's a more known occupation of Wounded Knee, which happened at Wounded Knee, South Dakota, and that lasted 71 days. It was really to bring awareness, for the rights of Native people, highlighting the poverty and social injustices that we were seeing, not just across United States, like urban areas, but yet within our own reservations, we were seeing that there were social injustices happening. So in '73, there was about 200 AIM members that actually took over that Wounded Knee site. Um, and that Wounded Knee site was a site that the U.S. Cavalry had slaughtered over 300 women, children. And so it was actually a sacred site for Native people. And so that was them really saying, like, we're not taking over something that doesn't belong to us like this. We're reoccupying this. This is our sacred land, and we have the right to be here. They ended up having U.S. Marshals, federal agents, all coming in there. There were two Lakotas that had died, with the shootouts that they were having with the federal agents at Wounded Knee. And when we talk about a time frame like '73, I mean, like my father was, you know, like 10 at the time, and maybe a little bit younger. But that's one thing we really instill with our young people and with the community that we speak with, is that we're a community that is healing. And when you look at health, like we know that all of any type of trauma, PTSD, affects the health that you see, the health outcomes that we're seeing. And when that's only a one or two generations away, it's very easy to see why we have such health disparities. As a result of the occupation, though, it did, whether indirectly or directly, had given that space for other tribes to um, be recognized as as federal tribes by the government, but also it was a turning point for the Native population, being able to have that self-determination on their own policies, having their own like tribal councils and things, really making their own, having that sovereignty that we see. But it also was leading up into the Indian self-determination, and the Education Assistance Act of 75. That was allowing tribes to be able to contract with federal governments for funding. And we know a lot of our tribal programs are government funded even today. A big portion of their funding comes from government contracts. And that is with their healthcare system, with prevention, with public health. The legislation was enacted with that 75, for them to be able, for natives to be able to operate their own healthcare systems and have a say so in their education. Um, More recently, one of the biggest ones was a Standing Rock encampment of 2016. And that was fighting against the Dakota Access Pipeline, to protect the water ways and the land, the sacred land that we have, that it was going through. We still see that there is a lot of the land back movement happening. I just got an email prior to getting on here about there being a land back movement. Like grant thing that's happening right now. And so there's a lot of push on just getting the land returned back to the tribes, to ancestral territories being recognized. Um, then also like the Native American voting rights, we know one of the biggest ways to make an impact and change systemically is through voting. Our local elections, along with, it looks a little different because we do have tribal elections as well, who kind of run the reservations. But so making sure that natives have the right to vote, combating those voter suppressions and access to voting. Um, and then one of the real big ones we have seen most, quite a bit now, is that MMIW, which is in the missing and murdered Indigenous women, has been expanded to include all relatives. And we have the highest rates of missing and murdered, of any population. And so I have a lot of pictures to show, because while we can say we're doing this work or that this is just really ingrained in the Native community, it's easier to see like what that really looks like, because it does look different for us than it does, I think, for other groups. Um, More on just Native storytelling itself is that we've always been a people of very, it's always been an oral tradition or using pictures. So for Lakota specifically, we have our winter counts, and these are some winter counts that are actually, um, this is one that we had created with Metro, and Steve had did this in 2012. Um, but explaining the history. And so I just like to give a visual of like why the traditional arts is so relevant, because we do talk about what does that symbology mean, because a lot of times it is telling a story. Traditionally, all of those symbols are telling a story of that person, of the way they carry themselves, or maybe like what they want their future to look like. And so, what path they would like to take. When you look at the environmental justice piece of it, this is how we merge culture with that. So, here's actually a picture. This was from the Harvest the Hope. They were doing a fundraiser, out in Neely, Nebraska. And so it was the farmers who were landowners out there who were fighting against that Dakota Access Pipeline going through. They were refusing to sell their land. And then Willie Nelson and Neil Young actually had went out there and did a benefit concert to fundraise for that fight that with the farmers, and that was in collaboration with it was a teepee uh, or it was a Cowboy and Indian Alliance, is what they're called. And so these are actually buffalo robes that Steve Tamayo, who's our founder of Bluebird, he actually created these buffalo robes, and they were gifted to them at that fundraiser. So here is another teepee that was being worked on, and this is one that was in Washington, D.C. Um, and here is that teepee kind of strung up in the background there too. They had did a couple of them, but the black and white picture is actually a picture of when AIM took did their takeover over at the headquarters. And so um, just showing like we know history is repeating itself. Like we understand like things came out of those movements when they did these things. And here we are again when we're uniting together for the same purpose of protecting the lands, protecting the waterways. That Cowboy Indian Alliance really like brought that unification of maybe different cultures and backgrounds that have not worked together, but seeing the greater cause. Um, and so that's Steve there explaining the TP and stuff at the Washington. So here is a picture. This is actually, there's a picture of three gentlemen. The one in the middle is Donnell Keeler. If you're familiar with Nebraska has a license plate that has a buffalo on it. He was a he was Isanti or Santee Dakota artist, very known in the area here, but he was a member of AIM. And this is actually one of his prints I have here at my house. Um, so Donnell's in the middle of that picture of the three men. One of the other men is actually my boys' uncle, that they were all three part of the AIM that went to the takeover of the headquarters. And then this is a the picture, the art picture that he has there is depicting the story of that takeover of the caravan of them going to DC, of the helicopter and all of the federal agents and stuff outside of the headquarter building that they had got into and took over. And then also because there was a firefight, so you can see the bottom portion of that is that actual church picture is of the Wounded Knee church that is at Wounded Knee in the bullets and stuff that were shooting at them from the agents. And so um, just utilizing that art to be able to tell the story still is so important so that we're not losing like we've been fighting these fights and that we're keeping those stories alive so that our kids understand like what has been done and what they can continue to do. These are pictures from COVID time. Clearly we're wearing masks. I think it was like 20 late 2020 maybe. um there's me and my sister, my niece. We had went to San Francisco and was able to go to Alcatraz. They do have a very large like exhibit there that is dedicated to like the native that had occupied it. And I think there's a lot of items. It was actually closed when we went, but we were able to get, some good pictures of just those are actually like what they painted on when you pull up to it, you'll see that Indians are welcome. This is Indian land. Um, there's the water tower there that they still, continue to repaint to keep that wording there. It is a big part of the story of Alcatraz. Um, but it makes such a difference as Native people to be in spaces where like you just have a connection to see something that is relevant and that like your history is not continuing to be erased. So this is actually pictures of at Standing Rock. So Bluebird actually came out of Standing Rock's encampment. And so when we talk about like how are we related to or how is natives related to environmental justice, we as a nonprofit were built out of the encampment from Standing Rock. So Steve, our founder, was actually um, the head like lead traditional artist teacher there because he has a traditional arts teaching degree, and he went up there. So this ran from the encampment was there from April 2016 to February 2017. There's Steve, so Indian Country had did um, spread on that, and he's talking about in the picture there he's making like a hand drum with one of the young men that they would use to sing like songs while they were there. Steve is not a frontline activist, but we know that like we continually tell our community, everybody is gifted in their own area, everybody has a purpose and a role in whatever space we're in. And so for him, there was a lot of frontline people, parents and guardians of young people. And so the young people were actually at the encampment. They were never, our younger ones. And they had created a school, and they have a water school that was created out of this. And so there's some pictures, but if you've ever been to South Dakota in the middle of winter, when you're saying from April to February, it's a good negative 30, 40 degrees up there, no problem. But they stayed up there the entire time in teepees and tents and other things. And so if you look at the picture here, there are two young men to the very right of the picture. Those are actually my older two boys. They were just young there. Um, but I think it's really important when we talk about just like healthcare, education, as how does that relate to you have people that are going through extreme weather conditions. With Bluebird, what happened was that there was a lot of donations coming in to Steve directly to take up with him for the school. There were school supplies and art supplies for the traditional art stuff and winter gear and non-perishable foods and all of those things. And so that's kind of how Bluebird was established, was to make sure that those donations were getting set aside into something appropriately, that it wasn't going personally to him. But he has been doing work with Native community and providing that cultural understanding for going on 40 years now, if not more. So it was only kind of the next step in his journey, I guess. Here's some pictures of some of the young people up there with some of the blankets that were gifted to them learning how to put up a teepee. This was actually their school. They were staying in the teepees for during the day for their school time and classroom. All these kids are so much older now. So here's some more pictures of Standing Rock that people don't always get to see or have seen. To be very honest, there was a recognized or wanting to be accountable that there was a big media shutout when Standing Rock was happening. Um, we had people like Steve, and we had like I have a younger sister that was going back and forth up there. Um, but when people went up there, like none of the cell phones were working. Most of these pictures and stuff are from like news reporters that went there and were taking pictures on the ground. But there was like waiting to hear back if somebody was okay. These were actually the police and federal agents shooting water cannons in the middle of winter. It was freezing cold there. But to look at like there was also a lot of rubber bullets. There were dogs that were being released onto the community people that were there. It was the largest encampment in modern time for Indigenous Native people. And so this is one that really lit a fire under the people to really like, we need to fight back and stand up and not take what we're allowing people to do. This is After Standing Rock, and we were officially an organization, nonprofit, Steve was doing contract work with a lot of the Native community organizations. And so this was a project that was focused on traditional arts, and this was at Kaneko. Um, but it really just goes back to that understanding of traditional arts and storytelling, because really the turtle is like we call uh, our area here, Turtle or Turtle Island. And if you look at the United States and Mexico and Canada and stuff, and it does make a shape like where it has the legs and head and tail and stuff. And so for Native people, it is very related. All things are connected. We are connected to the grounds, all of the winged relatives and all of those that are underground. And so making sure, like even with the turtle shell, it's very specific of that there's 28 shell or little kind of shell things around the outside of the shell and 13 in the middle. And that actually represents the 13 moons that we have in our indigenous like calendars, and the 28 days in between those cycles, those moon cycles, and the symbology of like everything being balanced and making sure that we're depicting all of our different relatives that are um, in the in our ecosystem around us. Looking at how do we get natives to be involved and vote and be a part of something. We are very, as a nonprofit, we do not decipher party lines or anything. Anytime that we have a chance to be in front of people, to bring our understanding of what is important for our community, for us to bring awareness that we are still here. We show up. So we were asked to have some dancers and singers perform for the Bold, Nebraska rally, um, doing this is a very early sample of one of our vendor tables, but it all very natural, utilizing all of the things around us to continue those teachings. We also have the first Native group that young people that went to, that have danced at the Museum of Native Americans in DC. So just teaching people more and bringing awareness to the positive things that our young people are doing. This was going to those lands and spaces that we had, um, as Native people have occupied prior to contact, and that while they are not our respective lands anymore, like still making sure that people understand the history that is behind it, and that those are spaces for us to be in. A lot of our people do not have the opportunity to get out of the local area. And so that's a big thing with our kids, is getting them to see all the different opportunities and places that they can go as Native young people. But also pay in recognition too, like that we have a lot of people who have served in the military, who are veterans. We have the highest rates of veterans. Um, and so anytime we can try to get in the community and be in the forefront of just saying like, hey, we have been in all these spaces. We are part of all of these communities. So a lot of the community work we do, um, this is a mural that we did in 21. Um, These are the Buffalo initial designs of Donnell Keeler that we were able to, his son is a good friend of mine. We were able to get permission from him to utilize his Buffalo design for this mural. But this mural sits off of in South Omaha by the like 25th and N Street, if you're from the local area. Um, but incorporating like our traditional medicinal plants. We have drinkables, edibles, some that we burn, just depending on what it is. But teaching our kids about those, having them look them up. For this one, two of the young ladies actually had a book of different medicinal plants and were able to go through, pick which ones they wanted to incorporate into the mural. And then this is a finished mural that um, pays tribute to the four tribes that are headquartered in Nebraska today. Um, but also putting light on our women because most murals in um, kind of forward facing stereotypes of Native people seem to be the image of men being the warriors or those being the ones who are in, the forefront of things, when really traditionally and still now our women are the ones who really are the backbones of the families, the tribes, the villages, and they're kind of have this say so, even though they kind of sit farther back. They run most of the things. So putting that pushing that strength in our own perspective of who's in charge on out for the public to see. But it also talks about there are the waterways incorporated kind of by their feet that have because we do identify our boundaries for different tribes and stuff based on the waterways, especially like in Nebraska. But that is a way that we were able to trade. We were able to adapt to the living that we had. And when we migrated, we were able to follow those. But looking at like how do we even just recycling, like we do arts and we do storytelling of creation stories and like about Devil's Tower. And so understanding how do we incorporate native storytelling into like all of the stuff that were used for props in this one were all just recyclable, like cardboard and things that we were able to find laying around and utilize to do something fun with the kids getting them. So this one is actually like struggle and resist. I think resistance or resilience is the words that they came up with for these. They were doing a spray paint workshop, but getting them the opportunity to learn how to do different art forms while also telling a story and like that some people see it as this, but this is how we feel about us. And these were actually used for another like performing arts um, thing that was happening with a different group. So, and then if you are in the area again, there is an orbit box that we have a bunch of young people help Steve do some traditional designs on. And so just bringing more awareness to the community that we are here, that we need to be involved in these conversations and at the table. This is Steve and Izzy, one of our cultural specialists talking at the boarding schools in South Dakota. And really, it's reclaiming those spaces that took away a lot of our rights. And we weren't allowed to have our own kind of history and understandings. And so, actually, now in a place that we're taking that to those schools, and they're requesting us to come in and teach those things to the Native students that they have. With our young people like that we have there's a national youth conference and it's at a different place every year. This one was in Minnesota, but I really wanted to share these ones because there's also in the far right corner, I think, there is a lady in the middle who is Winona LaDuke, and she is a big activist for Native people, for natural resources, for gaining back our homelands, and revitalizing cultural practices. She was in all of the AIM stuff before too, and so the stories that she has and being able like she was a big part of Standing Rock and fighting for those water rights and protecting the aquifers and things like that. And so we were walking down the street and we seen her and we were so happy to get a picture with her. But she was actually one of the speakers. So they bring in a lot of the speakers for this national conference, and there's about this year, I think they're projected 3,000 Native youth, all high school age, well, 14 to 23. And so we've got about 20 of us that were going this year. It'll be in Oklahoma City. Last year it was in San Diego. So the kids like that. Here's a small portion of them, but so that day was that theme day was directed for MMIW for the missing murdered Indigenous women and relatives. And a lot of them have personal connections to people who have, passed or been murdered or are still missing. And so that also kind of goes along with there is a currently we have a community kind of group of women who have created like a crisis response on any missing Indigenous youth person. And I know we've had one recently that they've been canvassing and looking for since Friday. And I just seen before I got on here that they had found that person. And so, but they put the word out and they put the pressure out. But we do have laws and stuff in place now that, like the feds and the U.S. Marshals are getting involved when we have missing person cases. So they have been cooperating with the community advocates that we have. This was our youth just recently in beginning of February, we were able to go to a SAMHSA Youth Summit in DC. So we try to send them as much as we can, and we have wonderful partners and sponsors who help us, but they're able to get some of those higher understanding as of advocating and different trainings. When we talk about health, we also sports is a big part of culture for Native people. So we do have grassroots community members who have started programs specifically for our Native Indigenous youth. And so this last summer, we were able to have, or fall, a group of them were able to go out for a big tournament to Vegas for the first time. We also, when all of the protests and stuff were happening, during uh for George Floyd, we were at Unity for in Minnesota that year, and so we were able to go to the memorial and really get to be present there. This is some of the work we do in-house. This is a partnership with University of Nebraska Medical Center that we have. We have a STEM program with them. They have the Youth Enjoy Science curriculum that they use, as well as eye research. Um, And so that's both middle school and high school focus. But this was just like about a month ago now. We were out at the Platte River. The kids had a day off from school, so we had planned a field trip. Went out and did water sampling, and then they were able to come back. Prior to that, we had a nice presentation and conversation and about like just cancer rates and nitrates and different things. So then we followed that up with the field trip, going out to do water sampling. And then we went back to the classroom and they were able to kind of go through with the strips and check the pH levels and all kinds of different things on there. And then now they're pulling all their data and stuff together to present out to the whole larger kind of youth programming. We have a big one on food sovereignty. One of the first pictures, sorry if they're a little graphic, was our kids really love to butcher. It's one of their favorite things to have do. The first time we really butchered in town was during when COVID hit. We had butchered two hogs, and we were able to make sure that like community elders had what they need and things like that. But then this year we've been doing we did a couple deer. We were able to do a buffalo recently just in February. And that's with a partnership with the Rosebud tribe. They have a buffalo ranch up there. So we were able to go up and the middle picture is actually when they were um, taking the buffalo down, but it's a whole process because we do include the cultural piece of prayer, of giving back, of giving prayer and tobacco down for the buffalo to for us to be able to harvest and butcher for our community needs. And so we went through all of those steps prior to actually putting it down, and then they brought it back to Omaha. And we have another great partner that's just south of Omaha area, local area though, still, that was able to have all the equipment and everything for us to go and use their space. The stuff on the left picture there. So we are very adamant about like we use everything, all the offal that they call it, like all the leftovers that a lot of people are throwing out. Like even when they initially took down in field dress, all of the organs, everything is kept. A lot of it is either eaten, used for ceremony purposes, or something. So even while we were butchering, they were able to. So there's like we're able to make sinew using the bladder for things like making traditional games out of all of the bones. We'd use everything from it. Um, when you talk about like really bringing awareness and having people. Media hasn't been our best friend, but we do have a great community partner who is actually a freelance writer, but writes a lot for Indian Country Today. And so we have gotten a lot of our programming and stuff put out with them. He's done quite a few stories on us just in the last couple months. We've been pretty busy. Um, but the kids were able, we had young people, old people, we have those that are in kind of rehab residential treatment stuff. Like we have everybody and anybody welcome that wants to learn, as long as they're working and not standing around because we have enough bodies. um, we need everybody to work. But even the young men were like singing on the table with their rib bones at the end of it. Like they thoroughly enjoy learning. I have an 8-year old now who she just turned 8, but is very upset that she didn't get to cut more. So she is all about butchering. But we also harvest. We have harvesting camps twice a year in the summertime. That's part of our summer programming. So this is some of our young people harvesting sage. We usually go back home to South Dakota where we're from because we um, we prefer the sage that's up there, and we know a lot of people and have access to it. But it's very important to we teach them how to properly harvest it so that we are making sure it's coming back when we need to, if it's too small, when is the best time to harvest it, but also teaching them the difference because we do use it for ceremony for different types of ceremonies. So there is male and female, and which one do we use for what? Um, we also do we harvest bitterwood. We harvest team sula, which is wild turnips, and we always make like a competition and games out of it. The kids love it. They always try to see who can get the biggest wild turnip or the smallest one, or the who can dig up the biggest root without breaking it. It's a big mess, but they thoroughly enjoy that. Um, Now, like a lot of the community gathering, memorials, so this is bringing awareness. Like, how do we bring awareness as a community? This is a community dinner round dance that we had did a few years back now. This was another one that the young people, anytime they say, "Hey, we want to go do this," we kind of just show up. Okay, let's go. Help them make signs or help them with supplies or whatever they want. There's a picture there with some T-shirts. This is one of our young relatives up in Santee had who was murdered, who still has not gotten any justice, but the family is very close with us. And so we try to honor her, remember her, keep her in our thoughts, and support the family as best as we can moving forward, but showing up at the courthouse and whatever it is that they want us to do. This is really recently. Like I said, we try to be very, as an organization, we are not putting anything publicly out one way or another. Um, but we do have a unity council. These are some of head, our council, like president, co-chair, and some of our members. But our kids are very big on protesting and using their voice and showing up and supporting. So this is actually a poster that they created that they wanted to go do a protest on supporting their community relatives and those that are in our community. And we do have a lot of community members who are majority of Native people are multiracial and carry many identities other than just being Native. And so making sure that we're supporting them in the best way that we can, making sure our role as an organization to support them is that we really just make sure like the scene is safe, that we have people there to like kind of secure and like we don't really say one way or another, but we really um, try to make sure that like our young people are being safe in the process, that if they need any assistance with permits or things like that, or if they're wanting to do a larger event, helping them through the process of this is how you do it. But we have raised very strong leaders in the community who are all like between 13 and 23, 24. So we want them to exercise those rights, but also making sure that we can support them and keep them safe. This was a way with all the things that's been happening in the communities and world that affect the Native community. This was real recently that our way of just self-care and wellness was to put on just a community lunch and was like, let's provide a space for us just to come together. A lot of people were very drained from all the things that were happening. And so it was a great turnout. It was just over the lunch hour, kind of did a potluck, like we provided a meal, a main meal, whatever. But a lot of people just brought things and we were able to just spend an hour, hour and a half together in positive energy to recover from all the things. Volunteering, they do a lot of cleanup, weeding, planting, being out in the community as much as possible. This is some of our cultural kind of connection spaces. So when we talk about land and getting land back, like this is up in the Black Hills. This is actually Black Elk Peak, and this is a ceremony that happens in March. We did not go. We were planning to. We're all booked and ready to go this year, but with the wildfires and everything, we didn't want to take them up there with just like the air quality and stuff that was happening because it was like that week when everything was on fire up there. So, but it is very just like centering for them, but reconnecting to sacred lands and making sure that they understand their rights as Native people, that they are able to be in these spaces that are technically national parks or spaces, but that as natives we have the right to harvest in them. We can get, fill out an application to harvest or do ceremony in them, that we do have those inherent rights for us still and that we need to exercise them. This is one of our young ladies camps where we are outside for 4 days. It's a coming of age ceremony, but really it's like we have a lot. We talk about environmental justice. Talk about mental health. We talk about health in general, reproductive health. So we have a lot. We have different speakers, great community partners who come in. We work very closely with a lot of the like UNMC, Methodist, Creighton, UNO. So there's a lot of universities that we work with who are able to support us in the work and making sure that our kids are getting like accurate information. Drumming and singing, and a big part of wellness for the Native community is just that connection to culture. And so continuing our prayer songs and continuing, like, we even for wellness, as far as prayers for healing and things like that. Um, when I say we use everything, here is our young men learning how to take apart a bird so that they can put together some regalia items, but how do they take care of it? How do they discard of the things that they're not going to use? What do they utilize them for? Um, so we pick up a lot of roadkill. We're saving the interstates. um, some cultural learning. These are just at different performances at different universities. the this is kind of some of our professional development is this teaching other people about the stuff that we do. While this looks just like a TP, there is a lot of geometry involved. There's a lot of education just on art. This was what the architect class, the construction of things. So getting them to understand like it's more than just putting up a TP that goes with that. This is this is from a training that we provided to the community. So these are all professionals in the Native community here in the Omaha area or Lincoln kind of extending area that were trained in a culturally relevant community support curriculum that is national, is backed by SAMHSA, but we were able to do a train the trainer for this and bring that to the community. And so I didn't know if we needed time for questions or anything, Kylie. I'm gonna leave it at that. I would take any questions if there are some.
Thank you, Nicole. Does anyone have questions before I do have a summarizing question, but I definitely want to prioritize others if there's other questions. Okay, well, I most appreciate. Oh, Tom, I saw you coming on video. You have a question?
So thanks, Nicole. I'm in Oregon, and I think we have I think there's nine tribes, but three of those are confederated, so they actually are maybe 12 different peoples or sub-tribes, within those
Hmm.
confederated ones. And I think there's something like 25,000 tribal members, but about half live on reservations and about half don't. But then I think I know that there's another 100,000 Native Americans who live in Oregon that are not members of these Oregon tribes. So when I listen to your talk about community and where you're doing that great stuff within a place, I'm curious how you interact with, and maybe it doesn't apply to your tribe, but how you interact with the folks of your tribe that live in, I don't know, Wyoming or California or Texas or wherever. So
So we're very
was
unique
that a
that
coherent question?
no, we actually most of the organizations around here are very local focused. We actually go across the United States. We do work. We actually have exhibits at the Smithsonian and stuff. We do a lot of work in DC, Minnesota, the Great Plains area, but we do. I've gone up there to Oregon, to Portland, and done some work with the Northwest. With our Indian Health Board and stuff up there before. And so we're open to going anywhere, working with anybody. We actually have groups that come through. Like we just had a group of like Asian students that were here in the United States for a week, who had came through. So we serve not just the Native community, but we do. There are, when you're talking that side, like East, the coast especially, there are so many that are not part of enrolled or like recognized tribes because they did not sign treaties and things with the government. And so some of them are state recognized. There's a lot of state recognized ones in California, I know. Um, but with that federal recognition, you also get those sovereignty rights that the government owes us. And so that's kind of, I think, just the difference. But really, I mean, we try to reach out. There are a lot of, so that youth conference I talked about, there's about 3,000 Native youth, and they're from all over, like across the United States. There's tons from the West Coast, East Coast, and they move that around. So, like, they'll have it in the Great Plains area one year, like last year was in San Diego. Next year it's going to be in Florida. So they move it around so you can see the different areas of the populations, of the Native populations too. But we're always open to, educating and working with and visiting anybody.
Thank you. Thanks.
Kathleen, did you have a question?
I did. I'm in California and in the on the Central Coast, and yes, we have uh, uh, a lot of different tribal groups in California, up and down the coast and inland that never did get federal recognition. But there has been work done in California in the land back realm. It's become pretty much standard to have the land recognition start a lot of our public events. And there have been some efforts to at least return small amounts of land to the people who have some kind of heritage, tribal heritage. But I'm just wondering, and I know that's happening in Washington as well, but
Mhm.
I'm just wondering, is there some kind of inventory where is somebody keeping track of all the land that's been given back? And is there some place where we can look and see where that's happening and what's happening on those plots of land? I know the agricultural stuff is one of the things that has been part of that, is restoring some of the agroecological practices on those plots of land.
I am not keeping track myself, but I will have to look into it. I don't know if there's somebody designated specifically that is keeping track across the board or not. I do know I've seen a lot in Washington area. I love the Seattle area and I haven't went recently. So it's nice to see some of that. But no, I definitely, if I find something, I'll send it Kylie's way. Maybe you guys can post it with where this is going or something on the website. I don't know. There is I was gonna say we were actually I took a youth group out to Disney in California, and they were the first Native youth group to ever dance out there. And that
Oh,
was years ago. It was fun. But we were able to do a lot of cultural exchanges with some of the mission groups over there.
Peggy, I see your hand up too.
Just a general question. I read somewhere that Trump wants to kind of make Alcatraz a prison
Mhm.
again. And I was wondering your perspective on that, since one of the primary starting points with the Indigenous movement was the occupation of Alcatraz. Thank you.
My perspective, I really I think we're in a state that Indigenous Native people are not scared to stand up just like they did before. So it'll be very interesting to see kind of what moves are made going forward and who's going to step in. But I do know there are collectively a lot of groups that are willing to kind of stand up if they feel like um, that should be land. I don't think I don't know. I'm like, in all actuality, I don't know how relevant that could even be, if that's even possible. I've been there, I've seen the kind of space there. And there definitely would have to be so much done to be able to even do that, I think. But I don't know. I don't know. I also know that it's a big tourist place and a lot of funding is going into the community there because of that. So I don't know how they feel about that either. I think money always talks. So I think there might be pushback from others outside of just Indigenous people.
Okay, I know we're getting close to time. So, first, thank you for sharing specifically about the leadership that Bluebird has in fighting for environmental justice. And um, I now work in community health and I teach in higher education, mostly nurses. And I spend a lot of intentional time talking with students about how to lead conversations with empathy and humility. And I think mostly from learning from Annie and working with you, Nicole, I've learned the importance of speaking with patients and about environmental history, seeing how historical trauma and your traditional practices can show up as sometimes non-compliance or mistrust in healthcare. Your slide about your growing practices really made me think about this, and I've heard you talk about it too. But from your perspective, if for the nurses that are on the call today, I guess in short, if you could summarize this quickly, what do healthcare professionals most often misunderstand about your community, and how can those of us on the call most respectfully advocate locally, potentially with community? I think Annie does a wonderful job at high levels, really fighting and advocating. And so a lot of us have worked with Annie signing on to petitions and doing some of that work. Um, but how can, like, what's the best way, I think, for the nurses on this call to show up for communities like your community across the United States?
Um, I think it's being very intentional, keeping those biases like we don't a lot of times don't feel like we have a bias. We're very open and but spending time. I tell people all the time, the biggest thing is like putting yourself in their space. Um, building that relationship and even just a couple times it doesn't take a lot really for the community to I think trust you if when you're taking the time to just show up for them or giving them the time I would say like in clinical settings and things like that is like acknowledging if they are is there cultural practices that you have that you know we should know about or that are you know would help us take care of you I think a lot of it is feeling judged. Most people feel judged when they walk into a space, or because of the lack of access to healthcare due to being underinsured or uninsured completely. When you do get into a space, a lot of times the biggest like community feedback I've gotten, because we've done a lot of these conversations around healthcare, public health, education stuff, has been that every time there is a referral and whatever, it's not somewhere they can go. They still can't get served. They still can't get what they need. So really taking the time to help them navigating systems is so hard for people. Um, but I think just learning up on it, understanding, having a conversation. Most people are happy to have a conversation about like, oh, what do you know? But also not always assuming because somebody is native that they understand what that history is. Because a lot of times I think that's where that biggest gap is that you have those feelings of PTSD, generational trauma and things, but you don't know where it comes from or you don't know why you feel like that until you start to unpack that and learn what that is from. Or the way that they were raised is due to those traumas that they weren't told about. And so I think that's the like biggest thing. But I will say plug for the next one on the second part that I have a lot more very directly towards healthcare and nursing and those things and like the water crises and stuff that we're seeing right now.
That was kind of my part of question why I was gearing that way. So I do want to just invite everybody to our May forum as well, because Nicole will be back and we'll touch more directly on that, but also highlight Bluebird's work with some local colleges here, Nebraska Methodist College, uh, and some community partnership on the Rosebud Reservation. So just highlight some lessons learned through that partnership and how uh, just mutually beneficial work that's being done there. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you.